Most e-commerce business owners are extremely focused on shopping and PMAX when it comes to advertising their stores with Google Ads. But there is at least one more very effective campaign type that you can use to drive an extra 4, 5, 6 or even more figures in monthly revenue to your store, and this is Google Search. Now, it's no secret, and it's like the original channel that Google provided us with, but it's something that's very underlooked these days, with every e-commerce business immediately jumping on shopping and PMAX, as I said, but search can still provide a ton of value to your business. And in this video, I want to share like the profit formula, if you like, for Google Search. So the 3 most important things you need to work on, and if all these 3 sort of things are in place, then you will have a search campaign that most likely produces some results. If I look across all our clients, most of them see some success from search as well, even if they might have like really design focused and subjective businesses like fashion, jewelry, etc. These 3 points that you need to really work on are pre-qualification, cost, and relevance. So let's talk about each of those 3, what you can do to improve them so that you have a well-running, well-oiled search campaign. Let's start with pre-qualification because that's arguably the most important of the 3. The issue with search ads, unlike shopping, for example, is that people don't see the product up front, and normally, unless you manually put it in, they also don't see the price up front, they don't see some other context that they see on shopping, and that's why search ads are generally at a disadvantage. So you have to overcome this by essentially pre-qualifying people as good as you possibly can. Pre-qualification means that you don't just want to get everyone to your site, like maximize the CTR without looking at any other metric, but actually getting the right person to your store. Let's say you sell sneakers for marathons specifically, right? Pretty weird example, but let's say you sell sneakers for long distance runners, for marathon runners, etc. You don't want to just advertise them as sneakers on a search ad, right? You also don't want to just target anyone doing some kind of sport. You don't want to target very basic runners or joggers that may not really be into them. You have to really specifically tell people what they will get. And let's say, for example, they are extremely expensive because they're made from a special material and they are really good. And let's say they cost, I don't know, $300, right? It may be a good idea to put that price tag on the search ad headline as well. So what you want to do is you want to manually and voluntarily limit the amount of people that will click through, because of course you want only the most relevant ones to your site. You might argue, well, the more people come to my site, the better, the more scalable it is, and that's true, but only if you don't have a finite budget, right? So if you can spend any money imaginable, then of course you would just want to get as many people as possible to your site. But since that's not the case for 99.9% of people, you have to work within your budget. And that means you have to specifically say, hey, I want you and I don't want you, right? I want this person to my store based on the search query, maybe even the audience, because of course you can also qualify by setting audiences for your search ads, but you want to make sure that the right person comes to your store, and you do that essentially by scaring away the others, right? If you tell people this pair of shoes is $300 and it's for long distance runners and it has some super amazing technology, some new material, the sole is super special. If you mention all these things, then the average runner might be like, probably not for me, not that interesting. I'm looking for something more basic, cheaper, easier. I don't need something as fancy. And if you do that sort of in depth and across the board, then you can make sure that, first of all, your CTR might decrease, but for that core audience that you're targeting, it is the perfect ad, and you make sure that people are qualifying themselves for your products. And this can be done for whatever you sell, right? It can be done for furniture, for fashion products, for electronics, for food. You have to make sure that you really tell people what to expect. As I said, really like to use the price for this, or at least give a price range so that people have an idea whether it fits their budget and whether it's a good idea to click that in the first place. And you will notice that the CTR may drop because of that, but it will produce better results and typically comes with a higher conversion rate. At the same time, you can of course also increase the relevance by, for example, adding negative keywords and making sure that you are constantly refining so that people that are looking for broader products and broader categories are not triggered by your ad. So on the one hand, you want to make sure that you're triggering the right keywords that are very close to your business. But since I don't recommend to focus on exact match and phrase match too much because broad match just performs better these days, you have to at the same time work on the negative keywords and make sure that they are filtering these people out that are just searching for things that are a bit too broad for your specific business. So on the one hand, make sure that you target the right keywords that are very specific, then make sure that you pre-qualify through your ad and make sure that you get the right people to your store, and then through things like negative keywords, audiences, etc., make sure that you are actually basically triggering the right people and blocking traffic that is not relevant for your business. Let's talk about the second aspect, and that is relevance, which is essentially click-through rate, right? And now we have to quickly look back at the first point again. In the first point, I said you want to focus on pre-qualification, which usually comes with a lower CTR. Yes, and pre-qualification is the most important thing. But the moment you reach pre-qualification, of course, then you want to maximize your click-through rate, because a high click-through rate will reward you with a better quality score, cheaper clicks, more volume, right? Because increasing your CTR is essentially scaling. If you have a 1% CTR versus a 2%, you are getting twice as much traffic if you have a 2%. So the moment you hit pre-qualification right, you want to work on relevance. And relevance can be achieved in a variety of ways. The classical one is to really group keywords into different ad groups systematically. You don't want to have, running shoes, marathon shoes, long distance running shoes, sneakers, workout shoes, gym shoes, all these kind of things in the same ad group. But what you also don't want, you don't want to have this level of granularity that was hot when, for example, single keyword ad groups were a thing. Occasionally, I still see some potential clients that come to me and I look at their account and they have like a campaign. Let's just stick again with this example of running shoes or sports shoes, and they have like 100 ad groups for literally any variation that you can imagine. That is definitely not necessary. This tiny little increase in CTR because you have the exact word in your ad and then repeat it, that's definitely not worth, first of all, the complexity of it, and second of all, it will reduce the speed of optimization, because you can imagine if you fragment everything, then Google needs more time, more traffic to really optimize every single bit of it, right? So it makes sense to really only cluster, like, let's say, the broader topics. In our example, it could be running shoes, could be one ad group, then let's say sports in general. It could be gym if you have something like that. Then you have the whole, as I mentioned in the beginning, like the long distance, marathon, etc. But that's pretty much it if we only stick to like the broad things. Of course, if you tailor to multiple types of sports and if you and other activities and all that stuff, you have to check what makes sense exactly. But the point is, yes, you want to sort of segment, and you want to make sure that by segmenting you get the highest possible click-through rate, because you can tailor each ad to each search query. But at the same time, you also want to make sure that you are not fragmenting too much, right? It doesn't really matter if someone is using a synonym of a word and then you make an entirely new ad group for it, if it means exactly the same. Yes, it's good to repeat the words in your headlines so that people feel like, perfect, that's exactly what I'm looking for. But doing it for every variation is absolutely not worth it. You can also increase your CTR, and you should increase your CTR by using compelling ad copy and compelling language, right? You should use call to actions for sure. You should use like strong words. You should also try to basically craft a bunch of headlines that are as different as possible. What I always tell my clients, or what I always do in case I manage their campaigns, is I rather use not so many headlines. It's something that I also mentioned in one of my latest videos. I don't use as many headlines as I could, all 15. I rather have only 7, 8, 9, whatever, but make them super distinct. Because one thing that I see when people use all the 15 headlines all the time, they repeat and repeat and repeat themselves, right? They have like, let's say 4 headlines that might be best running shoes, best shoes for running, running shoes the best, buy, that's a different one, but let's say great running shoes. Those 4 are super similar. And of course, one headline might be better than the other 3 if you just test it on a long enough time frame, but they're so close that chances are there won't be that much of a difference. So instead, focus on strong copy, strong language. Look at each of your headlines and think, okay, is this really much different from the others? Because that will give you the highest potential to actually see one of them really do well. And if you then look at your asset details, right, you can look at your ads and then click this little view asset details link right under the ad, and there you can check which one of your ads is, which one of your headlines and descriptions are actually performing well and how often they are showing. And if you have one that shows virtually all the time, then of course it means that it produces good results, and then you can iterate on that and so on and so forth. But you maximize your click-through rate by implementing all these things. Also, of course, you can look at some competitors, see what they are doing. Doesn't mean that what they are doing is working extremely well, because there are also many lazy brands. There are also many high budget brands that effectively don't care. But of course, you can get some new inspiration, and then you can put in more variety, and you can try a bunch of different things. And usually good click-through rate comes from constant testing, being somewhat unique, and using strong language and not repeating yourself. That will give you the highest click-through rate, highest scale, cheaper clicks, etc., etc. And now the third aspect is cost, because of course, ultimately your search campaigns will only be profitable if the cost is right. If you have an 8% conversion rate, but your CPCs are $20, then chances are you're still not profitable. So after you pre-qualify people correctly and you make sure that enough people click on your ad, because if you have 0.1% click-through rate, then the whole thing doesn't really make sense. Then you really have to try to cut costs. And it's not necessarily in order of importance, even though pre-qualification, I would argue, is the most important. But after you nailed these other things and you see a proof of concept and things are generally converting, then you can work on cutting costs, right? And you can do this in a variety of ways. You can do this by experimenting with the perfect bidding strategy. I usually use manual CPC in the beginning, except for accounts that have a ton of data. And I try to gradually get the CPC down. I try to find the sweet spot, like what is the minimum CPC I can pay while still getting reasonable traffic, while still getting a decent search impression share. All those things aren't fixed values, right? I have search campaigns with a 95% search impression share that are not branded, and I have others with 20% producing thousands of clicks a day. So you want a decent search impression share. You want to have a volume where you say this campaign is worth it. For some people, it might be spending $50 a day. For others, it might be spending $1,000 a day. But that is the really important part, right? You want to make sure that you can live with your CPC, and one thing is changing and testing the bidding strategies. Usually the more mature a campaign is, the more likely you are to see the best results from target ROAS and target CPA, or max conversion value, max conversions. The thing is, those might not necessarily give you the best and the cheapest cost per click, but they tend to give you the best search queries at some point, the best people, and of course you're much more likely, or you much rather would like to spend $2 on a click for someone who converts with 5% than spending $1 for someone who converts 1%, right? So the moment you use auto bidding, the actual cost per click isn't that relevant anymore. It's rather the overall thing, but you still, of course, want to get your CPCs down. Another way you can do that is, again, with negative keywords. So just as you can increase the relevance of your visitors and the pre-qualification through negatives, you can, of course, also use them to cut costs. And that is especially useful when you use broad match. So broad match, very important, but the moment you use broad match, you will inevitably get a lot of search queries that are not super relevant. So cutting all that waste will further reduce your cost, and it will make sure that you are getting the best results possible. In other words, especially the highest ROAS possible, because the cost thing is all about the profitability and not just about volume, not caring about how profitable you really are. Of course, you will also cut costs effectively by constantly increasing your click-through rate and increasing and improving your quality score. Quality score is only a secondary metric, so don't focus on it too much. Don't panic if it falls below 7 or something. But if the moment you nailed those other things, pre-qualification and getting enough people to your site, then in an attempt to cut cost, it does make sense to look at quality score and look at how you can tweak certain things. You can pause underperforming keywords, you can pause underperforming ads, you can try to be more relevant, and this will also cut and reduce your cost even further. So bidding strategies, negative keywords, cutting waste keywords, testing ads more frequently, potentially also working with audiences that are cheaper, but all these things can ultimately lead to a lower CPC, to lower overall cost, which will then boost your profitability, which is not always that easy to do with search. So these 3 points were basically the most important factors for having a successful search campaign in basically ever, 2023, beyond. Whenever you're watching this video, this is likely still relevant, but those are the most important factors that we apply to all our e-commerce clients that are using search. As I said in the beginning, not all of them, but many of our clients are using search, and many of them are using them successfully. If you want to learn more about how to implement search ads in your store yourself with actual ad copy examples, how to best structure them, different ad angles, how to learn from competitors, and so on and so forth, feel free to check the link in the description to my training, the eCom PPC Academy, which is specifically designed for e-commerce business owners. Or if you want us to do the heavy lifting and if you want us to do the work for you, then check the other link in the description, Cartlift, my agency, where we are working exclusively with e-commerce brands to boost their revenue and ROAS with Google Ads. We don't care about impressions, we don't care about clicks. In other words, vanity metrics, but only to take your store to the next level. So feel free to check one of these 2 links. Also, please subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments if you have used search ads before and how that went. Would be very interesting to know. And with that being said, I look forward to see you in the next video again. Thanks a lot for watching, and bye-bye.